It's been 24 hours since I last opened the doors to the elevator and rode it up to my apartment floor. In retrospect, it shouldn't have taken this long, and I knew that past the 30-minute mark. At first I thought maybe I was trapped, but the doors opened to reveal a white void. So, I was either high, or I was actually seeing something pretty disturbing. Most likely the latter, at least I hoped. I'll admit, I also had a bit of a panic attack at first. Seeing the white void is what really got to me though. I just couldn't explain it. At least I thought I could, but I clearly wasn't high, so that was out of the question. I took one look around the white void. I stuck my hand out. It wasn't solid. After a while, I managed to gain the courage to move about and actually go into the white void. There was a floor, to my surprise. And another thing I noticed is that the elevator, there was a bunch of them, in rows. They had numbers from 1 to 10, and the number I came out of was number 7. It then took me a while to realize that these elevators must be linked to maybe going back home. I went into one of them, and I realized that as soon as I clicked a button for a floor, it led me to an entirely different reality. There was one reality in which the previous place I was at, the hotel, was filled and populated by dog-like people. That was kind of funny to me at first. I went through a bunch of the others. There was infinite possibilities. Each time I'd go to a different universe. For a second I almost didn't want to go home. And then it hit me. Could I go home? I mean, if there's an infinite possible amount of universes within these elevators, surely there must be one that links back to my universe, right? I tried so many combinations, going in the different elevators, going through different numbers, but each time I'd only go to a new place. It felt like I was getting further and further away from my own home. Eventually, however, I found myself back in the white void. I was curled up. I'd basically given up at this point. I looked all around me. The elevator doors and the ever-expansive white void. It just kept going on and on. There was no escape, and I knew it. It didn't take long for the insanity to set in. Doing the same thing over and over again, I started to basically lose sense of who I was. I looked in every direction. I just saw the white void. I wandered around in circles, begging for some kind of escape. Eventually, I found it. There was one small door within the white void. I opened it, and there was a long corridor. Yellow wallpaper with some kind of weird grainy noise from a small light atop of the ceiling. It felt uncomfortable, and I actually considered going back. Whatever this place was an entirely separate entity, one that had an entirely different creepy atmosphere than the white void. I immediately shut the door, but before I could shut it, I heard the other door on the other end open. My ears picked up, and needless to say, I ran towards the elevator doors at that point, begging to be out of that place. I did a bunch of random combinations and got to a different world, and unfortunately, I was in the same place that I started. It didn't take me to another dimension at all. And then I saw it. The figure was slender, and it had no face. It opened the door. It was surprisingly creaky. As soon as it did, I I froze. I looked at it once, and when I did, it screeched almost, or it gargled a screech. This time I managed to regain part of my control, and I tried frantically to press every button on the elevator, but it didn't work, as expected. At this point, I think I accepted my fate, but then the elevator doors finally closed before it could get closer to the actual elevator itself. I was left in shock, and shortly after, I found myself home, luckily. That was probably the closest I'd ever gotten to a horrible death, at least I'd assume. That thing didn't have good intentions, I could see it visibly, from the way it moved, and from the way it tried to communicate. I take the stairs now, never used another elevator since, but from occasion to occasion I'll see someone else use an elevator, and when they do, I can't help but wonder out of morbid curiosity if they'll come out on the other end.